On March 15, 2024, exactly 21 years after Sarah and Michael Chen had vanished without a trace during what was supposed to be the road trip of their dreams, something impossible happened in a police impound lot in Barstow, California. At 3:47 a.m., with no one around and no power source connected, the radio in their 1999 Honda Civic, the same car that had been found abandoned in the Mojave Desert 2 decades earlier, suddenly crackled to life, playing the last song the couple had been listening to before they disappeared forever. This is the true story of a mystery that has baffled investigators, devastated 2 families, and challenged everything we think we know about missing persons cases. It's a story that begins with young love and endless possibilities, and descends into a labyrinth of unanswered questions that would haunt everyone involved for more than 2 decades. Sarah Elizabeth Chen was 24 years old in the spring of 2003, a recent graduate from UCLA with a degree in journalism and dreams of becoming a travel writer. Born Sarah Martinez in East Los Angeles to a Mexican-American family, she had met Michael Chen during their sophomore year at university, and their relationship had blossomed into the kind of deep, authentic love that their friends envied and their families cherished. Michael Chen, 26, was a second-generation Chinese-American whose parents had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1970s. He worked as a software engineer for a small tech startup in Santa Monica, but his real passion was photography. Michael carried his camera everywhere, documenting not just special occasions, but the small, beautiful moments that most people overlooked. Sarah, laughing at a coffee shop, strangers sharing a moment on the beach, the way sunlight filtered through their apartment window on Sunday mornings. The couple had been together for 4 years and engaged for 6 months when they decided to take what they called their pre-wedding adventure, a cross-country road trip that would take them from Los Angeles to New York City, with stops at every national park, quirky roadside attraction, and hidden gem they could find along the way. It was 2003, before GPS was standard in cars, before social media documented every moment of our lives, when a road trip still felt like a genuine adventure into the unknown. They were so excited about that trip, Sarah's younger sister Maria would recall years later. Sarah had been planning it for months, buying guidebooks, marking up maps with a red pen, making lists of places they absolutely had to see. She said it was going to be research for the travel blog she wanted to start when they got back. Michael's approach was more spontaneous, but no less enthusiastic. He had saved up enough money to take 3 months off work, and he planned to document their entire journey with his cameras, both a professional 35mm SLR and a small digital camera that was cutting-edge technology in 2003. Michael kept talking about how they were going to capture the real America, remembered his best friend, David Wong. He said they wanted to see the country the way it was meant to be seen, slowly, with time to really experience each place. He was especially excited about photographing all the small towns and landscapes they'd encounter. The couple spent weeks preparing for their journey. They had their Honda Civic thoroughly inspected and serviced, packed camping gear for nights under the stars, and created detailed itineraries that balanced must-see destinations with flexibility for spontaneous discoveries. Sarah researched local newspapers and radio stations along their route, hoping to write freelance articles about interesting people and places they encountered. Their planned route would take them northeast through Nevada and Utah, then across Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, and eventually to the East Coast. They had reservations at campgrounds and small motels along the way, but also planned to sleep in their car when they found particularly beautiful or remote locations. On the morning of March 18, 2003, Sarah and Michael loaded their Honda Civic with everything they would need for 3 months on the road. The car was packed efficiently but thoroughly, camping equipment, clothes for all weather conditions, Michael's photography gear, Sarah's writing materials, a cooler full of road trip snacks, and a collection of CDs that would provide the soundtrack for their adventure. "I remember helping them load the car," said Maria Martinez. "Sarah was so organized. She had everything in labeled bags and containers. Michael was more focused on making sure his camera equipment was secure. They were both just glowing with excitement. It was infectious." The couple said their goodbyes to family and friends, promising to call every few days and send postcards from interesting stops along the way. In 2003, cell phone coverage was still spotty in many rural areas, especially in the desert regions they planned to traverse. So they also carried a detailed road atlas and had planned their route to include regular stops in towns where they could use payphones if needed. Sarah's mother, Carmen Martinez, prepared a bag of homemade snacks for the trip and made Sarah promise to be careful. "I had this feeling," Carmen would say later, "not exactly worry, but just a mother's intuition that something might happen." But Sarah was so happy, and Michael was such a responsible young man. I told myself I was just being overprotective. Michael's parents, James and Linda Chen, were equally supportive but cautious. They had given the couple a Atelier membership and emergency roadside assistance coverage as an early wedding gift, along with a detailed first aid kit and emergency supplies. "We raised Michael to be prepared for anything," James Chen would reflect years later. "He wasn't the type to take unnecessary risks or make impulsive decisions. That's why what happened was so shocking. It was completely out of character for both of them." The last confirmed sighting of Sarah and Michael Chen occurred at 2:15 p.m. on March 20, 2003, at a gas station in Barstow, California. Security camera footage showed them filling up their Honda Civic, buying snacks and bottled water, and studying a road map spread across the hood of their car. They appeared relaxed and happy, with no signs of distress or concern. The gas station attendant, Bobby Rodriguez, remembered them clearly because they had asked for directions to a scenic overlook in the Mojave Desert that wasn't marked on their map. "They seemed like a nice couple," Rodriguez recalled. "The girl was really friendly, asked me about good spots for photography in the area. The guy was quiet but polite. They mentioned they were heading toward Las Vegas eventually, but wanted to see some desert scenery first." Rodriguez gave them directions to Kelso Dunes, a popular but relatively remote area known for its dramatic sand formations and clear night skies. It was about an hour's drive from Barstow into the Mojave National Preserve, accessible by a series of increasingly remote roads that eventually became little more than dirt tracks. "I told them to be careful and make sure they had plenty of water," Rodriguez said. "The desert can be dangerous if you're not prepared, especially for city folks who aren't used to it, but they had water bottles and seemed to know what they were doing." That was the last time anyone saw Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen alive. When the couple failed to check into their reserved campsite in Las Vegas on March 22nd, the campground simply marked them as a no-show and released their spot to other campers. It wasn't until March 25th, when Sarah missed a scheduled phone call with her sister Maria, that their families began to worry. "Sarah always called when she said she would," Maria explained. "Always. Even if she was just 5 minutes late, she'd call to let us know. When I didn't hear from her by evening, I knew something was wrong." Maria immediately called Michael's parents, who confirmed that they hadn't heard from the couple either. By the next morning, both families were making frantic phone calls to police departments, hospitals, and towing services along the couple's planned route. The initial response from law enforcement was frustratingly routine. Missing persons cases involving adults were common, especially during spring break season, and the couple had only been out of contact for a few days. Police in California and Nevada took reports, but explained that adults had the right to travel without checking in with family, and that most missing persons cases resolved themselves within 72 hours. But the families knew this was different. Sarah and Michael were responsible, reliable people who would never simply disappear without word. They had detailed itineraries, emergency contacts, and had promised to stay in regular communication. Something had gone wrong. On March 27th, 9 days after the couple had left Los Angeles, the families organized their own search efforts. Volunteers drove the route Sarah and Michael had planned to take, stopping at every gas station, restaurant, and motel to show photographs and ask if anyone had seen them. It was during this family-organized search that they discovered the couple had made it to Barstow and had been asking about desert photography locations. Bobby Rodriguez at the gas station was able to provide the crucial information about the directions he had given them to Kelso Dunes. Armed with this lead, a group of family members and volunteers drove out to the Mojave National Preserve to search the remote area. The landscape was vast and unforgiving, thousands of square miles of desert terrain with only a few maintained roads and countless unmarked tracks that led to nowhere. On March 29th, 11 days after Sarah and Michael had disappeared, searchers found their Honda Civic. The car was located approximately 8 miles from the main road, down a dirt track that was barely visible and led to a small clearing near some rock formations. The vehicle was unlocked, with no signs of forced entry or struggle. The keys were still in the ignition, turned to the accessory position, which had drained the battery completely. Inside the car, investigators found most of the couple's belongings apparently undisturbed. Their camping gear was still neatly packed in the trunk. Sarah's purse was on the front seat with her wallet, credit cards, and $347 in cash still inside. Michael's expensive camera equipment was in a bag on the floor, untouched. But there were some disturbing inconsistencies that immediately caught the attention of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies who processed the scene. The couple's cell phones were missing, despite the fact that they had been carrying 2 phones between them, according to their families. None of their photography from the trip was found in the car. Not the digital camera's memory card, not any developed film, and not the disposable cameras they had also brought along. Most puzzling of all, the car's radio was tuned to a station that didn't exist. The frequency, 108. 7 FM was set on the radio display, but that frequency was not assigned to any radio station in the California-Nevada region. When investigators tested the radio, that frequency produced only static. It was like they had just stepped out of the car for a few minutes and planned to come right back, recalled Detective Jim Morrison of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, who was assigned as the lead investigator on the case. But they had taken their phones and all their photos with them, which didn't make sense for a quick walk around the area. The location where the car was found presented its own mysteries. The dirt track leading to the clearing was barely passable for a sedan like the Honda Civic, and it led to an area with no particular scenic value, just rock formations and scrub brush with no interesting views or photography opportunities. It wasn't the kind of place tourists would go, Detective Morrison explained. There was nothing special about that spot, nothing that would draw photographers or sightseers. It was like they had followed someone else's directions to meet someone there. Ground searches of the area around the abandoned car began immediately and continued for 2 weeks. Search and rescue teams with dogs, volunteers on foot, and helicopters with thermal imaging equipment covered hundreds of square miles of desert terrain. The searches revealed no trace of Sarah Martinez or Michael Chen, no footprints leading away from the car, no clothing or personal items, no signs that they had attempted to walk out of the desert or had been the victims of animal attacks. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. In 20 years of search and rescue work in the Mojave, I've never seen anything like it, said Linda Torres, who led many of the volunteer search efforts. People don't just disappear without leaving some kind of trace. Even if they wandered off and died of exposure, we would find remains eventually. The desert preserves everything. As the initial searches proved fruitless, the investigation expanded to consider other possibilities. Had the couple encountered foul play? Had they been abducted? Were there criminal elements operating in that remote area of the desert? Detective Morrison interviewed everyone who had contact with the couple during their trip, reviewed security footage from gas stations and restaurants along their route, and checked with law enforcement agencies across the region for any reports of suspicious activity or similar disappearances. The investigation revealed that the area where the car was found had a history of criminal activity, though nothing that seemed directly related to missing persons cases. The remote location had occasionally been used as a dumping ground for stolen vehicles, and there had been some drug-related arrests in the broader region over the years. "We considered every possibility," Detective Morrison said. "Kidnapping, murder, drug deals gone wrong, human trafficking. But there was no physical evidence to support any of these theories, and no demands for ransom or any other contact from potential perpetrators." One theory that gained traction was that the couple had encountered someone who offered to guide them to a better photography location, perhaps promising to show them something special that wasn't on any tourist maps. The person or persons could have led them to the remote spot where the car was found, then abducted them from there. But this theory also had problems. The couple were careful, intelligent people who were unlikely to trust strangers with their safety. And if they had been abducted, why leave their valuable possessions behind in an unlocked car? Why not just steal the car along with its occupants? As weeks turned into months, the case began to receive media attention. Local news stations picked up the story, and Sarah and Michael's disappearance was featured on several national television programs that focused on missing persons cases. The media coverage brought in dozens of tips and potential sightings from across the country. Someone claimed to have seen a couple matching their description at a diner in New Mexico. Another caller reported seeing them at a gas station in Colorado. Each lead was carefully investigated, but none proved to be credible. "We followed up on every single tip, no matter how unlikely it seemed," Detective Morrison explained. "Sarah and Michael's families deserved to know that we were doing everything possible to find them." The most promising lead came from a trucker who claimed to have given a ride to a young couple matching Sarah and Michael's description somewhere in the Nevada desert in late March 2003. The trucker said the couple had told him their car had broken down and they needed to get to Las Vegas. But when investigators checked the trucker's logbooks and questioned him more closely, his story fell apart. The dates didn't match, his description of the couple was vague and inconsistent, and he eventually admitted that he might have been confusing them with other hitchhikers he had picked up over the years. As the first anniversary of the disappearance approached, both families organized memorial services and renewed appeals for information. They established a reward fund and maintained websites with photographs and details about the case, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have seen something or know something that could help solve the mystery. Carmen Martinez never stopped believing that her daughter might still be alive somewhere. "I kept thinking maybe they had amnesia, or maybe they were being held somewhere and would escape eventually," she said. "I couldn't accept that they were just gone forever." The Chen family was more pragmatic, but equally determined to find answers. James Chen hired private investigators and consulted with psychics, pursued every lead no matter how far-fetched, and maintained regular contact with law enforcement to ensure the case stayed active. "We needed to know what happened," James Chen explained. "Not knowing was worse than any other possibility. At least if we knew they were dead, we could grieve properly and move on with our lives." But as years passed, the case gradually faded from public attention. Detective Morrison retired in 2010, passing the file to a younger investigator who reviewed it periodically but had no new leads to pursue. The couple's families held annual memorial services and continued to hope for answers, but the trail had gone completely cold. The Honda Civic was eventually released from evidence storage and returned to Michael's parents, who couldn't bear to drive it but also couldn't bring themselves to sell it. The car sat in their garage for several years before they finally donated it to a police training facility, where it was used to teach crime scene investigation techniques to new officers. In 2015, 12 years after the disappearance, the car was transferred to a long-term storage facility for retired police training vehicles in Barstow. Ironically, just a few miles from where Sarah and Michael had made their last confirmed stop for gas. The car sat in the storage lot for 9 more years, slowly deteriorating under the desert sun. The paint faded, the tires went flat, and dust accumulated on every surface. It became just another forgotten relic in a lot full of old police cars, fire trucks, and other vehicles that had outlived their usefulness. But on the night of March 15, 2024, exactly 21 years after Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen had vanished into the Mojave Desert, something impossible happened to that forgotten Honda Civic. At 3:47 a.m., with no electrical power connected and a battery that had been dead for over a decade, the car's radio suddenly turned on. The display lit up, showing 108.7 FM, the same mysterious frequency that had been set when the car was found in 2003. And for exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds, the radio played a song, "The Long and Winding Road" by the Beatles, the same song that had been found on repeat in the car's CD player when it was discovered 21 years earlier. The security guard who witnessed this impossible event immediately called the police, convinced that someone was playing an elaborate prank or that he was experiencing some kind of hallucination. But security cameras confirmed what he had seen and heard. The radio in the long-dead car had indeed turned on by itself and played that specific song. When investigators arrived to examine the car, they found no explanation for what had occurred. The battery was still completely dead. There was no external power source. The radio shouldn't have been able to function at all, let alone tune itself to a specific frequency and play a particular song. But there was something else, something that would reignite the investigation into Sarah and Michael's disappearance and suggest that their story was far from over. Hidden in the car's glove compartment, behind the owner's manual and insurance papers, investigators found something that hadn't been there during the original investigation. A small digital memory card, the type used in early 2000s digital cameras. The memory card contained 127 photographs that appeared to have been taken by Michael Chen during the couple's final road trip. The photos showed their journey from Los Angeles to Barstow, including images of Sarah at various stops along the way, desert landscapes, and candid shots of their life on the road. But the final photos on the memory card were unlike anything in the rest of the collection. They showed a remote desert location that appeared to be where the car was eventually found, but they also showed something else. Something that would change everything investigators thought they knew about what had happened to Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen in March of 2003. The discovery of the memory card in the Honda Civic's glove compartment sent shockwaves through both the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and the families who had waited 21 years for answers. Detective Lisa Rodriguez, who had inherited the cold case when Detective Morrison retired, immediately recognized the significance of finding new evidence after more than 2 decades. "In all my years in law enforcement, I've never seen evidence appear in a case that had been thoroughly investigated multiple times," Detective Rodriguez said. The car had been processed by forensics teams, searched by the families, and used for police training for years. There's no way that memory card was there during the original investigation. The memory card was a 32 millibyte compact flash card, standard for digital cameras in 2003, but now obsolete technology. The fact that it had somehow appeared in the car after 21 years was puzzling enough, but the contents of the card would prove to be even more mysterious and disturbing. Digital forensics expert Dr. Marcus Webb was brought in to analyze the memory card and extract its contents safely. Using specialized equipment to read the outdated format, Dr. Webb was able to recover all 127 photographs stored on the device, along with the metadata that revealed when and where each image had been taken. The metadata was consistent with a Canon PowerShot G2, which matches the camera equipment that Michael Chen was known to carry, Dr. Webb explained. The timestamps showed the photos were taken between March 18th and March 20th, 2003, which corresponds exactly with the couple's known travel dates. The first 115 photographs told the story of Sarah and Michael's road trip exactly as their families had imagined it. The images showed a young couple deeply in love, enjoying every moment of their adventure together. There were photos of Sarah laughing as she posed next to roadside attractions, Michael concentrating as he drove through desert landscapes, and candid shots of them sharing meals and camping under the stars. The photos captured the joy and spontaneity of their journey, Sarah making silly faces while Michael took her picture, both of them grinning widely as they stood next to their Honda Civic with the sun setting behind them, intimate moments around campfires where they seemed to exist in a world of their own. "Looking at those photos broke my heart all over again," Maria Martinez said when she was shown some of the images. "You could see how happy they were, how much they loved each other, and how excited they were about their future together. It made their disappearance even more tragic." But it was the final 12 photographs on the memory card that transformed the case from a missing persons investigation into something far more mysterious and unexplainable. Photos 116 through 127 had been taken on March 20th, 2003. According to their timestamps, the same day Sarah and Michael had stopped for gas in Barstow and asked for directions to scenic photography locations. But these final images showed something that defied explanation and challenged everything investigators thought they knew about the couple's disappearance. The first of these final photos showed Sarah and Michael's Honda Civic parked in what appeared to be the same remote location where it would later be found abandoned. But in this photograph, the car wasn't alone. Surrounding it were 7 other vehicles, cars, trucks, and SUVs from different eras, some appearing to be from the 1980s and 1990s, others more contemporary to 2003. "It looked like some kind of gathering or meeting," Dr. Webb observed. "All the vehicles were arranged in a rough circle, as if people had intentionally come together at this remote location." The next several photos showed people getting out of these vehicles and gathering in the center of the circle. The figures were distant and somewhat blurry, but it was possible to make out approximately 15 to 20 individuals of various ages. Sarah and Michael appeared to be among them, identifiable by their clothing and general appearance from the earlier photos. What made these images particularly unsettling was the body language of the people in the gathering. Rather than the casual postures of tourists or travelers who had happened to meet by chance, the figures appeared to be participating in some kind of organized event or ceremony. Everyone was facing toward the center of the circle, Detective Rodriguez noted. It had the feeling of a ritual or religious gathering rather than a spontaneous meeting of travelers. Photo 121 showed the group holding hands in a large circle, with what appeared to be some kind of object or structure in the center that wasn't clearly visible due to the distance and lighting conditions. The timestamp indicated this photo was taken at 11:47 p.m., well after sunset, which explained the poor image quality and the eerie atmosphere captured in the photograph. But it was photos 122 through 125 that contained the most disturbing and inexplicable elements. These images appeared to show the same gathering, but now there was a bright, intense light emanating from the center of the circle. The light was so bright that it washed out most of the detail in the photographs, creating stark silhouettes of the people standing around it. The light didn't appear to be coming from any artificial source like flashlights or vehicles. It seemed to be emanating from the ground itself. The light in those photos doesn't match anything we know about conventional lighting, Dr. Webb explained. It's not consistent with fires, flares, or vehicle headlights. The intensity and color spectrum are unlike anything I've seen in forensic photography. Photo 126 was perhaps the most disturbing of all. Taken at 11:52 p.m., it showed the circle of people, but now some of the figures appeared to be rising off the ground. The image was blurry and distorted, possibly due to camera shake or some kind of electromagnetic interference, but several human forms seemed to be suspended in mid-air above the bright central light. The final photo, number 127, was taken at 11:54 p.m. and showed only the desert landscape with no people, no vehicles, and no light. It was as if the entire gathering had simply vanished in the span of 2 minutes. That last photo was the most chilling, Detective Rodriguez said. It showed the exact same location where we found the Honda Civic the next week, but completely empty, as if nothing had ever happened there. The discovery of these photographs raised more questions than it answered. If Sarah and Michael had been taking pictures of whatever was happening at that desert gathering, why was their camera equipment missing when the car was found? How had this memory card ended up in the car 21 years later when it clearly hadn't been there during the original investigation? And most importantly, what had happened to the couple during those final minutes before photo 127 was taken? Detective Rodriguez assembled a new task force to reinvestigate the case using modern technology and techniques that hadn't been available in 2003. The team included digital forensics experts, behavioral analysts, and specialists in unusual or unexplained phenomena. The first step was to verify the authenticity of the photographs. Using advanced digital analysis tools, the team examined the images pixel by pixel, looking for any signs of manipulation or digital alteration. We subjected those photos to every test we could think of, Dr. Webb said. Compression analysis, metadata verification, pixel-level examination for signs of editing, everything came back as authentic. These photos were taken by the camera in question on the dates indicated, with no evidence of post-processing or manipulation. The team also analyzed the location shown in the photographs, comparing them with satellite imagery and topographical data from 2003. The images were confirmed to have been taken at the exact coordinates where the Honda Civic was found, in an area so remote that it was unlikely to have been visited by casual tourists or travelers. We're talking about a location that's 8 miles from the nearest maintained road, accessible only by unmarked dirt tracks, Detective Rodriguez explained. It's not the kind of place where people would randomly gather, especially at night. Investigators began researching whether there had been any reports of unusual activity in the Mojave Desert region around the time of Sarah and Michael's disappearance. What they discovered was both fascinating and deeply troubling. Records from the Federal Aviation Administration showed several reports of unexplained lights in the sky over the Mojave Desert during March 2003. Pilots flying commercial and private aircraft had reported seeing bright lights that didn't correspond to any known aircraft or ground-based sources. We found at least 6 separate reports from pilots who saw unusual lights in the general area where Sarah and Michael disappeared, said Dr. Rebecca Chen, no relation to Michael, an atmospheric physicist brought in to consult on the case. The descriptions were remarkably consistent. Bright white lights that appeared to be emanating from the ground and were visible from aircraft flying at 30,000 feet. More intriguing were reports from amateur radio operators who had recorded unusual signals and transmissions in the same time frame. Several ham radio enthusiasts in California and Nevada had documented strange radio frequencies and signals that didn't match any known broadcasting sources. The most interesting was a signal recorded on March 20th, 2003 at approximately 11:50 p.m., said radio frequency analyst Tom Morrison. It was a repeating signal on 108.7 FM, the same frequency that was set on the radio in Sarah and Michael's car when it was found. The signal had lasted for exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds, the same duration that the car's radio had played The Long and Winding Road when it mysteriously turned on in 2024. The coincidence was too specific to ignore, but investigators had no explanation for what it might mean. The task force also began investigating the possibility that the gathering shown in the photographs was connected to some kind of organized group or cult operating in the desert region. Missing persons databases were searched for other disappearances in the area, particularly those involving couples or young adults who might have been targeted by such a group. What they found was a pattern that had somehow been missed during the original investigation. Between 1995 and 2005, a total of 11 people had disappeared in the general region of the Mojave Desert under circumstances similar to Sarah and Michael's case. The victims were typically young adults, often couples, who had been traveling through the area and had simply vanished without a trace. Once we started looking at the broader pattern, it became clear that Sarah and Michael weren't isolated victims, Detective Rodriguez explained. There was something happening in that part of the desert that was claiming multiple people over a 10-year period. The most striking similarity among the cases was that many of the missing persons' vehicles had been found in remote locations with their radios tuned to non-existent frequencies, just like Sarah and Michael's Honda Civic. In 1997, a couple from Phoenix named Jennifer and Robert Garcia had disappeared while camping in the Mojave. Their truck was found 3 days later with the radio set to 106.3 FM, a frequency that wasn't assigned to any station in the region. In 2001, a young man named David Martinez, no relation to Sarah, had vanished while hiking alone in the desert. His car was found with the radio tuned to 107.9 FM, another non-existent frequency. The radio frequencies were always between 106 and 109 FM, in the range that's not typically used for commercial broadcasting, noted Tom Morrison. It's almost like someone was using these frequencies as some kind of marker or signal. The investigation team began mapping all the locations where vehicles had been found, looking for patterns or connections that might reveal where these mysterious gatherings were taking place. What emerged was a rough circle of sites, all within a 30-mile radius of the spot where Sarah and Michael's car had been discovered. At the center of this circle was a location that had never been thoroughly investigated, an abandoned military facility that had been decommissioned in 1991 after the end of the Cold War. The facility, known as Desert Test Station Bravo, had been used for experimental radar and communications research during the 1980s. After its closure, the site had been left largely unguarded and had gradually been forgotten by most government agencies. When we looked into the history of that facility, we found some very interesting connections, Detective Rodriguez said. The research conducted there in the late 1980s involved experimental radio frequency technologies and what were described as atmospheric communication experiments. Classified documents released through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that the facility had been working on projects related to long-range communication using radio frequencies that could penetrate the ionosphere and be received anywhere on Earth. Some of the research had involved attempts to communicate with aircraft and spacecraft using previously unused portions of the FM radio spectrum, specifically frequencies between 106 and 109 FM. The coincidence was too strong to ignore, Dr. Rebecca Chen observed. Here was a facility that had been experimenting with the exact radio frequencies that kept appearing in missing persons cases, located at the geographic center of all the disappearances. The task force obtained permission to investigate the abandoned facility, though they were warned that much of the site was considered potentially hazardous due to unknown chemicals and experimental equipment that had been left behind. What they found at Desert Test Station Bravo would fundamentally change their understanding of what had happened to Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen, and to all the other people who had vanished in the Mojave Desert over the past 3 decades. The facility was larger than they had expected, with multiple underground levels that had been carved into the desert bedrock. Most of the buildings were empty shells, stripped of equipment when the facility was closed. But in the deepest underground level, investigators found something that shouldn't have been there. A sophisticated radio transmission facility was still operational, powered by solar panels that had been installed sometime after the facility's official closure. The equipment was modern, clearly maintained, and was actively broadcasting signals on multiple frequencies in the 106-109 FM range. Someone had been using this abandoned government facility to operate an illegal radio transmission station, Detective Rodriguez said, and based on the equipment and power consumption, they'd been doing it for years. Computer analysis of the transmission equipment revealed that it had been programmed to send specific signals at predetermined times, signals that corresponded exactly with the dates and times when people had disappeared in the surrounding desert. But the most shocking discovery was found in a hidden room adjacent to the transmission facility. The room contained detailed files on every person who had disappeared in the region since 1995, including comprehensive dossiers on Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen that contained information that had never been made public. The files included photographs of the missing persons, copies of their driver's licenses and identification documents, detailed information about their families and backgrounds, and what appeared to be psychological profiles analyzing their personalities and vulnerabilities. It was like someone had been specifically targeting these people, Detective Rodriguez explained. The files showed that whoever was operating this facility had extensive knowledge about their victims before they ever arrived in the desert. But perhaps the most disturbing element of the files was a collection of photographs that appeared to have been taken during the mysterious gatherings shown in Michael Chen's recovered memory card. The photographs showed multiple ceremonies or rituals taking place at various locations in the desert, always involving groups of people standing in circles around bright lights emanating from the ground. In many of the photos, people could be seen rising into the air above these lights, just as had been captured in Michael's final images. Some of the photographs were dated going back to the mid-1990s, suggesting that these gatherings had been taking place for nearly a decade before Sarah and Michael's disappearance. But what was most shocking was that many of the people in the photographs were the same individuals who had been reported missing over the years. "We were looking at photos of people who had supposedly disappeared," Detective Rodriguez said. "But in these images, they appeared to be willing participants in whatever was happening at these gatherings. The implications were staggering. Were the missing persons actually victims of abduction or murder, or were they somehow voluntary participants in whatever was occurring at these desert ceremonies? And if they were willing participants, where were they now? And why had they chosen to abandon their families and previous lives?" The investigation had uncovered evidence of a conspiracy or organization that had been operating in the Mojave Desert for decades, using abandoned government facilities to conduct mysterious activities that somehow involved the people who had been reported missing. But the team was still no closer to understanding what had actually happened to Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen during those final minutes captured in the photographs, or how their memory card had appeared in their car 21 years after their disappearance. The answers to those questions would come from an unexpected source and would reveal a truth more extraordinary and terrifying than anyone involved in the investigation could have imagined. The breakthrough that would finally solve the mystery of Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen's disappearance came from an unexpected source: a dying man's confession in a Nevada hospital, 150 miles from where their car had been found 21 years earlier. Dr. Harold Zimmerman, age 78, had been admitted to University Medical Center in Las Vegas in late March 2024 with terminal cancer. As his condition deteriorated, he had requested to speak with law enforcement about what he called the Desert Project and his role in the disappearances that had haunted the Mojave region for decades. Dr. Zimmerman had been a senior research physicist at Desert Test Station Bravo during the 1980s, working on classified projects involving electromagnetic field manipulation and what the military had euphemistically called consciousness transfer experiments. When Detective Rodriguez received the call about his confession, she immediately traveled to Las Vegas with her team. "I need to tell someone what really happened before I die, Doctor," Zimmerman said from his hospital bed, his voice weak but determined. "I've carried this guilt for over 30 years, and I can't take it to my grave." What Dr. Zimmerman revealed over the course of several interviews would expose one of the most extraordinary and disturbing secret programs in modern American history. The research at Desert Test Station Bravo in the 1980s had been part of a classified military project codenamed Gateway Frequency. The official goal was to develop new communication technologies that could penetrate any environment and reach personnel anywhere on Earth. But the true purpose was far more ambitious and dangerous. We were trying to prove that human consciousness could be separated from the physical body and transmitted like a radio signal, Dr. Zimmerman explained. The military applications were obvious. Imagine being able to project soldiers' minds into enemy territory without risking their physical bodies. The experiments had initially used volunteers from military personnel, but as the research progressed, the team realized they needed subjects who wouldn't be missed if something went wrong. That's when they began targeting civilians, particularly young couples traveling through remote areas. "We developed a system for identifying potential subjects," Dr. Zimmerman continued. "People who were traveling alone, who had told their families they were going to remote areas, who wouldn't be immediately missed if they didn't arrive at their destinations on schedule. The process began with radio transmissions on specific frequencies that could induce a form of hypnotic state in susceptible individuals. Cars traveling through the desert would pick up these signals, and drivers would find themselves compelled to follow directions to predetermined gathering points. The radio frequencies we used created a resonance with certain brainwave patterns," Dr. Zimmerman explained. "People would think they were making their own decisions to visit scenic locations or meet interesting people, but they were actually responding to our transmissions. When the subjects arrived at the gathering points, they would find what appeared to be a group of like-minded travelers or spiritual seekers. In reality, these were other victims who had been processed through the program and were now under its influence, along with project personnel posing as fellow travelers. The gatherings were designed to seem mystical or spiritual," Dr. Zimmerman said. "We created the appearance of some kind of New Age ceremony or consciousness-raising experience. People wanted to believe they were part of something meaningful. The bright lights captured in Michael Chen's photographs were the result of experimental electromagnetic field generators that created intense energy fields in specific locations. These fields could indeed cause people to levitate or float, an effect that reinforced the subject's belief that they were experiencing something supernatural. The levitation effect was real, Dr. Zimmerman confirmed. The electromagnetic fields could counteract gravity in localized areas, but it wasn't magic. It was advanced physics that we'd developed for the project. During these ceremonies, the subjects were exposed to specific frequency combinations that gradually separated their consciousness from their physical bodies. The process was irreversible and fatal, but the consciousness could theoretically be captured and stored using the project's experimental technology. We told ourselves we were pioneering a new form of human existence, Dr. Zimmerman said, his voice filled with regret. But we were really just murdering innocent people for the sake of military research. The project had been officially terminated in 1991 when the Cold War ended and funding was cut. But Dr. Zimmerman revealed that a small group of researchers had continued the work in secret, using the abandoned facility and mobile equipment to continue their experiments. Some of us couldn't let it go, he admitted. We'd spent years on this research, and we were convinced we were close to a breakthrough. We formed a private group and continued the experiments using our own resources. This secret group had been responsible for the disappearances that continued through the 1990s and 2000s, including Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen. They had refined their techniques over the years, becoming more sophisticated in their selection of subjects and their methods of control. By 2003, we had the process down to a science, Dr. Zimmerman said. We could identify suitable subjects, guide them to our locations, and complete the transfer process in a matter of hours. But Dr. Zimmerman also revealed something that shocked even the experienced investigators. The consciousness transfer experiments had actually been successful, at least partially. The subjects didn't just die, he explained. Their consciousness was captured and stored in our quantum field generators. In a sense, they were still alive, but in a form we didn't fully understand. This revelation explained the mysterious radio transmissions that had been detected over the years. The stored consciousness of the victims was somehow able to manipulate electromagnetic fields, causing radios to tune to specific frequencies and occasionally producing sounds or music that had been meaningful to them in life. They were trying to communicate, Dr. Zimmerman said. The radio incidents weren't random. They were attempts by the stored consciousness to reach out to the physical world, especially their families. The incident with Sarah and Michael's car radio in 2024 had been triggered by a significant anniversary, exactly 21 years since their disappearance. Their consciousness, stored in the quantum field generators at the abandoned facility, had somehow found a way to reactivate their car's radio and play the song they had been listening to during their final moments together. The memory card that appeared in their car was placed there by the same process, Dr. Zimmerman explained. The stored consciousness retained memories of their final experiences and was somehow able to materialize the evidence they wanted their families to find. Detective Rodriguez asked Dr. Zimmerman the crucial question: were Sarah and Michael still alive in some form, and could they be restored to their physical bodies? Dr. Zimmerman's answer was heartbreaking but definitive. Their bodies died during the transfer process in 2003. What remains is their consciousness, their memories, their personalities, but they can't be restored to physical form with our current technology. They exist in a state that's neither fully alive nor completely dead. However, Dr. Zimmerman did offer one possibility for the families to find some form of closure. The quantum field generators are still active at the facility, he said. If you could access the stored consciousness, you might be able to communicate with them one final time. They might be able to tell you what they want their families to know. Armed with this information, Detective Rodriguez organized a joint operation involving the FBI, state police, and military personnel to secure the abandoned Desert Test Station Bravo facility. The operation, conducted in April 2024, resulted in the arrest of 3 surviving members of the secret research group who had continued operating the consciousness transfer program. The arrested individuals included Dr. Margaret Foster, a neuroscientist who had been Dr. Zimmerman's second-in-command, and 2 technicians who had maintained the equipment over the years. All 3 were charged with multiple counts of murder and conspiracy. In the deepest levels of the facility, investigators found the quantum field generators that Dr. Zimmerman had described. The equipment was unlike anything they had seen before, arrays of crystalline structures surrounded by electromagnetic field projectors, all connected to computers that monitored energy patterns that researchers believed represented stored human consciousness. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the atmospheric physicist consulting on the case, worked with a team of experts to understand the technology. "It's beyond anything in mainstream science," she said. "They had apparently achieved a form of quantum consciousness storage that we're only beginning to theorize about in academic research." The computers connected to the quantum field generators contained files that corresponded to each of the people who had disappeared over the years. Each file contained what appeared to be a complete record of an individual's memories, personality patterns, and consciousness structure. Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen's files were among the most complete in the system, suggesting that their consciousness transfer had been particularly successful from a technical standpoint. Following Dr. Zimmerman's guidance, the research team attempted to establish communication with the stored consciousness through the facility's equipment. Using modified radio transmission equipment, they broadcasted messages on the frequencies that had been associated with each disappeared person. On April 15, 2024, exactly 1 month after the Honda Civic's radio had mysteriously turned on, the team received their first response. The quantum field generators began producing audio signals that, when processed through the facility's computers, became recognizable as human voices. The first voice they heard was unmistakably Sarah Martinez, speaking with the same warmth and energy her family remembered. "Tell my family I'm okay," Sarah's voice said through the speakers. "Michael and I are together, and we're not in pain. We didn't want to leave them, but we're not really gone." Over the course of several sessions, the research team was able to establish more extensive communication with Sarah, Michael, and several other stored consciousness entities. The conversations revealed the final pieces of the mystery that had puzzled investigators for decades. Sarah and Michael confirmed that they had been drawn to the desert gathering through the radio transmissions, believing they were going to witness some kind of spiritual experience. They had been excited rather than frightened, thinking they were about to be part of something extraordinary. "We thought we were so lucky to stumble across something amazing," Michael's voice explained during one session. "The people there were so welcoming, and everything felt magical and spiritual. We had no idea what was really happening until it was too late." The couple described experiencing the consciousness transfer process as initially painless and even euphoric. They felt themselves lifting out of their bodies and becoming part of something larger than themselves. It was only after the process was complete that they realized they could no longer return to their physical forms. "We tried to contact our families for years," Sarah said. "Every time there was a strong electromagnetic field in the area, we could sometimes manipulate radios or electronic devices. We wanted them to know we were still here in some way." The stored consciousness entities also revealed that they had been aware of each other's presence in the quantum field generators. Rather than being isolated, they had formed a kind of community, supporting each other through their non-physical existence. "We're all here together," Michael explained. "Everyone who disappeared over the years. We've been trying to help each other and looking for ways to let our families know what happened to us." When asked if they wanted to be released, or if there was any way to reverse the process, Sarah and Michael gave an answer that brought both comfort and sadness to their families. "We've been here for 21 years now," Sarah said. "This is our reality. We miss our physical lives and our families terribly, but we've found peace with each other and with the other people here. We don't want our families to spend their lives mourning us. We want them to remember the love we shared and find happiness." Michael added, "We're okay, we're together, and someday, when the technology exists to fully understand what's been done to us, maybe science will find a way to help us and the others." The families of Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen were offered the opportunity to communicate directly with their lost loved ones through the facility's equipment. The conversations that followed were deeply emotional and provided the closure that had been missing for 21 years. Carmen Martinez spoke with her daughter for the first time since 2003. "Mija, I never stopped believing you were out there somewhere," she said through tears. "I know, Mama," Sarah responded. "I could feel your love all these years. It helped keep me strong." James and Linda Chen had similar conversations with Michael, expressing their love and telling him about the life he had missed, the advances in technology he would have enjoyed, the photographs he would have taken, the family events where his absence had been deeply felt. "I've been watching over all of you as much as I could," Michael told his parents. "I'm proud of how strong you've been, and I want you to know that Sarah and I found a way to have our wedding ceremony here. We're married in every way that matters." The revelation that Sarah and Michael had somehow managed to unite in their non-physical state provided an unexpected source of comfort for both families. Their love had survived even the extraordinary circumstances of their disappearance. After extensive consultation with experts in physics, consciousness research, and medical ethics, authorities made the difficult decision to leave the quantum field generators operational. Shutting down the equipment would effectively end the existence of the stored consciousness entities, which would constitute murder of people who were still aware and capable of communication. The facility was secured and converted into a research station where scientists could study the technology and work toward potentially developing ways to either restore the consciousness entities to physical form or help them transition to whatever comes after death. "It's the most complex ethical situation we've ever faced," said Dr. Rebecca Chen. "These people are clearly alive in some form, but they can't return to the physical world as we know it. Our responsibility is to protect them while working toward solutions." The families of the disappeared persons were given ongoing access to communicate with their loved ones through the facility's equipment. Support groups were established to help them cope with the unique nature of their loss, grieving people who were dead but still somehow present. The members of the secret research group were prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Dr. Margaret Foster and her associates received life sentences for their roles in the murders of dozens of innocent people over 3 decades. Dr. Harold Zimmerman died peacefully in the hospital in May 2024, having finally unburdened himself of the secrets he had carried for so long. Before his death, he donated his entire estate to fund research into consciousness transfer technology, hoping that future science might find ways to help the people whose lives had been stolen by his research. The case of Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen officially closed in June 2024, though in many ways it remained open in the most important sense. The couple existed in a state that defied conventional understanding of life and death, but they were no longer missing. Their families knew where they were and could communicate with them, providing a form of resolution that no one could have imagined when the investigation began. The story became a landmark case in both criminal justice and consciousness research, challenging fundamental assumptions about the nature of human existence and the boundaries between life and death. Maria Martinez established a foundation to support other families dealing with unexplained disappearances, using the unique insights gained from her sister's case to help others find hope even in the most desperate circumstances. Sarah taught me that love doesn't end just because someone's physical body is gone. Maria said. She and Michael found a way to be together, even in the most impossible situation. Their story isn't about death. It's about the power of love to transcend anything. The Honda Civic that had sat forgotten in a storage lot for 21 years was finally returned to the Chen family, who decided to preserve it as a memorial to their son and his love for Sarah. The car was restored and is now on display at a museum dedicated to consciousness research, where it serves as a reminder of the mystery that changed our understanding of human existence. The radio in the car has never played spontaneously again since that night in March 2024. But sometimes visitors to the museum report hearing faint music coming from the vehicle. Always The Long and Winding Road by the Beatles, the song that Sarah and Michael were listening to during their final moments in the physical world. Scientists continue to study the quantum field generators at the former Desert Test Station Bravo, working toward the day when technology might advance enough to offer the stored consciousness entities new choices about their existence. Until then, Sarah Martinez and Michael Chen remained together in their non-physical realm, their love story continuing in a form that no one could have imagined when they set out on their road trip adventure in March 2003. Their case serves as a reminder that some mysteries have answers that are stranger than fiction, and that the boundaries between life and death, between science and the supernatural, may be far more fluid than we have ever understood. In the end, Sarah and Michael's disappearance during their road trip in 2003 wasn't solved by traditional detective work or forensic science. It was solved by the power of love reaching across time and space, finding a way to turn on a car radio 21 years later and guide investigators to the truth that would finally bring their families the closure they had sought for more than 2 decades. Their story continues, not in the physical world they left behind, but in a realm where consciousness persists beyond death, where love transcends the boundaries of existence, and where the mysteries of human experience are still being written by those brave enough to explore the unknown territories of life, death, and everything that lies between.